You are now listening to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, where we talk all things related to mental health, life lessons, and the culture. My goal is to help each and every listener pursue and center wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Chanda, licensed clinical psychologist. Now let's get into it.
I say it's the confidence for me.
It's the confidence for me.
I'm just going to say it confidently. Say, it's the confidence for me.
It's the confidence for me.
Brought here and forced into slavery. And based on those traumas that we experienced during slavery, some of those same behaviors, the attitudes, the belief systems that we adopted as slaves can be passed down to generations after that. And that is why we see like the hyper.
Yeah, amen. You're a treasure, Dr. Chanda Reynolds. Thank you so much.
I've not been listening. I'm learning so much.
Happy New Year, everybody. It is the very first Wednesday of the new year, y'all. I'm so happy that you have decided to tune into another episode of the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast. I have some amazing guests lined up for the entire year of 2022, and I'm just excited to have you here along with me in this journey. So without further ado, I want to jump straight into just thanking you for listening, thanking you for being a part of my story, thanking you for leaving every review, every story post, any way that you've contributed to the growth and the progress of this podcast. I appreciate you. Thank you to every listener in Germany, every listener in the US, every listener in the UK and India, and I believe we have France as well. Like, this thing is literally out of the country. Like, we have streamers from everywhere, and I couldn't have gotten here without, of course, Jesus, and without you, and I appreciate that. So today is going to be very exciting because I have my girl who will be joining me. Listen, if you haven't heard of her directly, you've probably seen her work somewhere. She's the creator of Psychotherapy. She's contributed so much to different publications. She has so many books out there. You've probably seen her work on the Crown Act. And so I want y'all to give it up for my girl, Dr. Afia Mbalashaka. Dr. Afia, please join me. Dr. Afia, I'm so happy to have you here.
You know, I'm super excited to be here with the one, the only Dr. Chanda.
Girl,
so I'm super excited.
I could be saying that about you. Like you're major out here. Like you're a big deal. Right? I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with me. So much love and respect for you and the contributions you have made to the field overall. Like it literally is like you're so silly.
I accept the words of affirmation. That's my love language.
Absolutely. I love it. So tell the people a little bit about yourself. Like, what do they need to know about Dr. Afia?
What do you all need to know? Okay. One, I love all things Black people, which that overall guides my work and my desire to help to heal. And I love all things Black hair, and actually have dedicated a new portion of my career to hair related things. So really how I marry my loves together to create my career and what guides my work and energy.
Yeah. I would say, like, I would argue that is your God-given purpose. Like, that's what you were put on this earth to do, like to merge those things.
Yeah. And I don't want to make any time specific things, but today is Nia for Kwanzaa, which means purpose. And so I took a long walk this morning, 3 miles around a lake, and just was really thinking about what is my purpose and am I fulfilling it? The thing is, I feel like if I totally fulfill it, then I'll die. So I know that I have more left to do, but to think about alignment. So being purpose driven for sure. I remember in college, I read the book, The Purpose Driven Life, and it was like super life changing. And I remember thinking like, oh, like this is how you create alignment and really ground yourself in like your very existence. How do I make my actions speak to who I am and why I'm here? and I'm a part of something much bigger. And my unique contribution can help things to keep moving forward.
You know, that's so interesting because I've literally like been thinking the same thing about how, of course, like purpose and how we can kind of like allow our works to go beyond us. People who have never heard of a Dr. Chanda, I want them to be able to read a publication or a book years later about how like I contributed to the field, or this theory that I developed, this theory, you know, that is like how we make change. That's how we make lasting change. And that's how we continue to fulfill our God-given purpose. And so I appreciate that. And I honestly feel like you're doing it. Like, I really do. Like, even I was talking to somebody yesterday and you came up in conversation. They were like, oh, that's the person who did the Capitol Hill Crown Act. That's the person who was doing the Crown Act. They didn't know your name, but they knew your work. And I think that speaks a lot to, like, again, like that contribution and the passion that you have and you dedicating your life to that purpose.
Wow, that makes me feel really good. It makes me want to do more and go deeper, right? In terms of, I think sometimes I'm conflicted as a mental health professional about how much to put out there about myself, right? Because there's this sort of veil that we're supposed to have privacy and not have everybody know our business. But I'm like, but kind of my business is what's supposed to be out there.
Right.
And so I'm glad that I've been able to find a unique niche to occupy relating hair and mental health and even in public policy now.
That's amazing. Listen, I want to be like you when I grow up. Just putting that out there. Because like, seriously, like, you know, I definitely admire you and like those contributions and like the everything. If you're listening to the audio, Dr. Afia is blushing so hard right now. I love it.
I know you didn't even know Black people could blush like this, but it's coming through.
I love it. So we definitely going to continue to talk about your work in the field, especially as it relates to psychotherapy. And I literally love that name. In our first segment, though, with Hot Off the Press. So that is our segment where we talk about the news. We talk about pop culture. We talk about wellness and how it relates to us as Black people, and just really having conversation about that. So we ready for Hot Off the Press?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, let's go. So I'm going to read this article briefly. So it is about Insecure, an insecure ending. It says, after 5 seasons, Issa Rae's hit comedy series Insecure aired its final episode Sunday night. All of the characters fans have had watched to navigate love, friendships, and their characters in Los Angeles ended up in a good place. The series finale took place. Viewers were on an emotional journey as they saw Issa and their characters drive past her old apartment building in the dunes, having love triangles and choosing Jay Ellis, which is Lawrence, and Lawrence and her heal and unbreakable friendship with Yvonne, Origi's character, and Molly. And I am screwing this article all the way up, but they also likely shed a few tears with watching Molly. Y'all, transparency. My show notes are on the side of my computer, so it's just a little hard to read, but bear with me. Y'all get the point. They also likely shed a few tears watching Molly tie the knot in her Oscar de la Renta wedding gown. As the final episode debuted, Insecure cast members and fans took to social media to express their gratitude for their influential HBO show. Dr. Afia, what were your thoughts on the final episode?
Can I talk about my feelings? It was all feelings. I definitely was one of those people who cried at Molly's wedding, and it surprised me. It took me off guard because I've never cried during an Insecure episode ever, but it was something about her developing a secure attachment with someone, because I think, you know, in terms of very literal thinking about Ainsworth and all these different psychologists for secure attachment versus insecure, I always think about the show in that way, in terms of the anxious, the avoidant, the disorganized attachment styles when it comes to relating to others. And I just felt like Molly Molly's character had the greatest arc of the whole show. And so, not to say that a marriage means that someone no longer has relationship issues, but she really invested in herself. Like, she invested, she was reflective, took feedback. She had been going to therapy from the beginning, but like really had to negotiate her parents' wellness and planning and how to show up for people and how to receive support. Because I think that that's what happened this season, that she was more open to receiving and disclosing and getting care.
Yeah.
So, because of course I was totally Team Lawrence. I was from the beginning. I just felt like, because I watched the last episode with my husband, who had not seen season 1, 2, or 3. He watched 4 and 5 with me because those came out during the pandemic, and he was sitting and watching. But I had to explain to him why I was getting so emotional.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you don't know, in the beginning things were real bad for Molly. So, or even explain. I'm like, yeah, because Issa had cheated on Lawrence. He was like, she did. Like, he didn't have that context to understand the ending of the relationship, or that Lawrence would be eating cereal on the couch all hours of the day to see how much he had grown into the lip too. But yeah, it had me all in my feelings.
Right. Listen, me too. Like I always cry at season finale, so I knew I was gonna cry. Like this one, like every time, Dr. Afia, anytime I watch a series finale, I can't watch them. Like the other day, I was binging on Family Matters, and you get to the series finale episode, it's like, dang, like.
See, now I never made it to the end of Family Matters because the Stefan Urkel versus Steve Urkel stuff was just going so far, I couldn't keep up. I'm like, he's Bruce Lee now. Like, I couldn't keep up with that machine. So I did not see the final episode of Family Matters, but I was there from the beginning doing the Urkel dance.
Right? In terms of and what was it, Urkelbot? I was scared to death of Urkelbot as a kid.
But you know, I would say the best episode of Family Matters ever was when he first became Stefan Urkel. I remember screaming as a kid and like it was so exciting that he had transformed. Maybe I just like the concept of transformation, and maybe that's what happened for Molly and Lawrence as well. Yeah.
Maybe that's it. So even in that concept of like transformation, we saw like each character transform, and I thought it was very significant that they didn't do this transformation in like their early 20s and mid 20s, but this was a transformation that came throughout life, and they finally got to that state of happiness in like early to mid 30s, maybe even late 30s. I don't know, but they were in their 30s.
That timeline was jumping around.
Right. It was a little confusing, but I loved it. What do you think was like the significance of that? Why was that important to include in the show?
I think a big part is the investment of time. Yeah. I know that there are some people who are really frustrated with the timeline that happened, like in skipping things. They didn't show Molly's mother's funeral and all these different things. Like, how could you just skip over that and skip over that? But I'm like, but time, like that investment of time, and really recognizing that it's not an overnight phenomenon that you transform, but it's this consistency, which I know, even though I'm not in my early 30s or mid 30s even anymore, that time investment can really do wonders when you are consistent in investing in yourself, and even investing in other people and your career and all of that. But like that yeah, it's a time factor.
Yeah, for sure. And I really enjoyed it because, like you said, people often get frustrated with the time associated with investing in yourself and the time associated with maturing and growing in relationships. And we feel like we got to have it all together at a particular age.
Ooh, like there's urgency.
Yes.
Urgency. And I know, as someone who has felt sort of behind in life at points, I'm gonna say I have felt that way. Like, dang, where are my kids? Where's my house? Where's my whatever? And so I think that even a show like that shows sort of this parallel process of it all comes in time, right? If you really invest in that way.
I'm a believer in God's perfect timing. Like, I don't want to do anything outside of that. Like, outside
you can't, right?
right.
You can't.
So my philosophy is I enjoyed watching Insecure because, of course, while we saw the ups and downs, it made us cry, it made us angry in certain episodes, but we can relate to it. I find that this show, in my opinion, was anti-racist in its existence because it didn't focus on our collective trauma. It didn't allow Hollywood to really emphasize and highlight those aspects that other shows had in order to get an audience, or in order to, just, I don't want to call any shows names out because, number one, they're not giving me a check for this podcast. Number two, like, we don't do free branding over here. But, it's just a matter of, there are lots of shows out there who really capitalize off of our collective pain, who capitalize off of our Black trauma, who emphasize like community violence and, drugs, all those things. But this show did not. This show allowed us to be, it allowed us to experience all, just a wide range of emotions without discussing that. Like,
yeah, I agree 100%. And it was extremely relatable in that way for people. And I don't know if this sounds bougie or not, but like us. Because I was curious, like, did it reach broad audiences? But I know every week for the past few weeks, and even previously, my clients would bring up Insecure episodes. Like, some of them were really triggering, like the episode for I guess I'm gonna call it fatherhood, where Lawrence was really having to navigate the role that he would take in his child's life with Condola. But I work with a lot of single moms, and them even navigating, like, there's a choice there, I don't have a choice, or things like that. Or just even, I know I got triggered, and I'm using triggered in terms of it elicited a lot of emotional response, triggered by the first episode of this season of reunions, because college reunions are a really interesting phenomenon because it forces you to assess. It forces you to assess your progress in terms of what you were able to achieve professionally, or even like how you look different. Like, it just, there's no way. And even Kelly navigating her death, as she would describe, it really gets people in an existential space, right? Therapeutically, that's very important for us to think about life, death, and everything in between, and especially purpose. And so I started thinking, and I'm like, what have things been like for me since college? In what ways have I transformed emotionally or not? In what ways am I still need a lot of growth and to learn. So
yeah. And I love that you recognize that. Yeah, like, because personally, I feel as though we all should be in a state of changing, right? Because nobody has ever reached perfection. But when we have those blind spots, when we're not seeing those areas that need to change, that's when we stay stuck. So, yeah.
Right. Right, Dr. Chanda, doing a whole intervention on me.
Okay, and I have to ask, so Issa Rae wore like so many different hairstyles throughout her seasons there, right? What were your thoughts on some of the natural hairstyles and like some of the things that she had displayed?
Yeah, there was a whole visual narrative of her hair in particular that I felt like it was a character in the show. Like, legitimately, it was a person that had their own storyline, because I think her hair was reflective of her mood, identity, sense of fashion, income, emotional and relationship status. And I just really want to give praise to Felicia Leatherwood for really working magic. I've had the opportunity to talk with her at points, and just her saying that it's not like she has some specific hairstyle that like, this is what we'll do today, but she really kind of goes within and listens to spirit to create with her hands. Like, and so that's why I think the hairstyles were so meaningful, because it wasn't scripted.
Wow.
It was felt. it was felt like the kinesthetic sensation of Issa Rae's hair spoke to Felicia Leatherwood in that way.
Love it.
To create such unique styles and styles that are great for work, for downtime.
Right?
So yeah, I definitely think that hair was more vocal on this show than probably any other show. And
Yes.
okay, tell me if I'm being mean or not. I'm not trying to be mean. But season 5, Molly's hair was the best it ever looked with the low cut. Like, I'm like, yes. And I think that's why I loved her transformation in the arc of her character, because I'm like, those wigs just were not doing her beauty justice. And so just like the part and everything, I'm like, whoo, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful hair.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it takes a certain level of confidence to be able to want to wear your hair like that and to be able to like pull it off successfully. I know a lot of people who are just like, oh, I just don't have the confidence to wear short hair, so I just, do X, Y, and Z. I think that,
for me, my head is shaped weird. So
yeah, and I don't think it's too much going on in this area, so I don't think I would do that haircut. But I think that really speaks to Molly's like transformation and her finding herself and her identity and building that level of confidence. Even though it's a haircut for a lot of people, I think that haircut personified a lot of things for her.
I agree.
Great place for us to transition into talking more about psychotherapy. So talk to us about like what started your passion and hair and psychology, and what was the birth of psychotherapy? Like, how did you get to that point?
I'm glad you're calling it a birth, because it was a whole pregnancy and delivery. And I'm so caring for it right now. So
love it.
I always loved doing hair. I would do hair at family cookouts and in a lawn chair and have my little cousins come, and I create all these styles, lay their baby hairs. This is in the 90s.
I love
and
it.
do all their hair. And so that translated then to when I went to college, that I would almost have these sort of pop-up salons in my dorm room. Now, I never had any training or anything like that as a teenager, but I found that this was a way that I connected well with my community. So going to a predominantly white institution for college, there were only just a few speckles of Black students on campus. And by doing people's hair was actually how I got to connect at a deeper level. And I developed a reputation like, Afia braids. And so like it would be football players coming in. I got like street cred, because I'm like, yeah, he got that touchdown because I braided his hair. But I don't know. And so, or any like formal or dance that I would be doing my friend's hair, or just for their birthday or something, because I never charged anyone. It was not a business. I just wanted to hang out and do hair. And it was like art therapy. It was a creative time for me. And so I remember talking to my Aunt Brenda on the phone one day. She's now an ancestor, and telling her, when I graduate, should I study hair or keep studying psychology? And she said, well, why can't you do both? Now, I don't think she was advising me to do both at the same exact time, but that's the way I interpreted it. And in my college dorm room, I birthed psychotherapy and thought, I can do psychology and hair together. And so I did end up going on to pursue a PhD in clinical psychology at Howard, because I wanted to go to like the Blackest place. In my head, Howard was the Blackest place to study psychology. And so I went there, got my PhD, got licensed as a psychologist, even got a tenure track position as a professor. And then I went to hair school. And people were like, what are you doing? That's insane. Like, you already have a private practice. You have a research lab, you're teaching classes, and you're going to do an internship at a salon and take classes and stuff, and for free, like that. I was doing all these people's hair for free. And I'm like, yeah, I felt like that was a more authentic way to engage with the Black community and healing. And so I put my hours in. I had to do 100 heads for free at the salon, and courses, presentations. You know, I did well in my presentations. I got A's on all my stuff in my paper. I'm like, get this paper out. So I definitely did well for all those things. But really coming and making a business out of it didn't come till 2019.
Okay.
Where I officially developed a curriculum where I was training stylists and barbers and community members and educators, all that, therapists, in using hair as part of mental health first aid. Mm-hmm. So I go through an in-depth history of our hair. That's really what is healing to begin with, to really go through thousands of years of Black hair history. Yes. It includes going over how signs and symptoms of mental illness look within communities of color, right? Because, you know, we use the DSM for diagnoses, but it doesn't always look the same way for us. Mm-hmm. So using my experience as a licensed psychologist to kind of describe case studies and how to recognize and be empathic to various signs of mental illness. And then also sort of more applied skills of psychotherapy, which includes active listening, because that's the hardest part. I think for me, I don't know about for you, Dr. Chanda, becoming a therapist, I think the hardest part was learning how to listen.
Yes.
And it took years to do that. Yeah. Recorded sessions and all of that feedback. So we actually, as part of the psychotherapy certification process, spent a lot of time on the active listening component in terms of really making sure people feel heard and understood, and get feedback around that. And even a part of the training is how to find a therapist and get someone to go to therapy, because we've all been there where it's like, oh, you need therapy, but it's like, how do you actually get someone? And what's the difference between a psychiatrist, a counseling psychologist, someone with a PsyD, with a PhD and clinical psych? Like, we go through all of that so that people are clear about how to actually find professionals to do the work as well. So that was birthed in 2019. I think the first training officially we did in Cuba, which was amazing. At this mansion, we had a chef. We were making cigars. But now it's virtual, and I do have an in-person psychotherapy certification coming up in Brooklyn. Because I don't know about you, Dr. Chanda, but Brooklyn, if you've been there, you know every other store is a braiding shop or a barber shop. So I'm like, let me go to Brooklyn. So I rented a whole mansion in Brooklyn to do this socially distanced training. Can you come? Okay, that's a side note. I would love for you to come to do the certification, because it's open for everyone who wants to learn how to use hair as an entry point into mental health.
Man, listen, well, first of all, I think I told you during our first conversation, we have that in common. A lot of people don't know that I also went to hair school as well. And you're right, the training is very intense and sometimes very difficult, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about how like active listening is a major part of even being a stylist, because Black people, that like, where do we come to be vulnerable? We come to our hairstylists, our nail techs, like our, the church, like those are places, those are our safe havens where we feel like we can open up, we can talk freely about what's happening in the world. Ashe.
Yeah, that's our informal support system and network. So I really want to make sure that the people who are doing that mental health work are being supported and building skills, right, that maybe hair school didn't teach, and to actually get training from a clinical psychologist about doing this work.
Exactly. I love that. And the fact that you're doing trainings in so many different areas, it's amazing. But like you said, like those places like Brooklyn, and I'm thinking other places in New York, like the Bronx, like all those places are meccas for like Black hair. And I really love the fact that, you're really taking this on the road. next stop, Atlanta. Like I think like Atlanta, they need something like this because there's so many hairstylists in Atlanta. And right there. But I really love this. So Dr. Afia, can you talk more about this correlation between Blackness and hair care? Like what is that? What has been your research and findings in that?
Yeah, well, it's ancient. It's ancient. In traditional African societies, from birth to death, hair has been critical to how we prepare our mind, body, and spirits to receive blessings. Hair has been such a part of Black politics and culture since we've existed. And so to understand how hair can be used both for medicinal purposes and even poisonous and hurtful ones too. But understanding that stylists oftentimes have taken on a role of healer or advice giver. There's a Ghanaian proverb, when your sister is your hairdresser, you need no mirror. And so it really speaks to how we need to trust the people who are caring for us in our hair. Because to some degree, our hair is like an antenna. It can pick up on other people's energy. And in a lot of traditional African societies, hair is seen as very spiritual, right? Hair is the highest point on our entire bodies and therefore the most connected to the divine. And so that, our hair tends to grow up. And so going towards the heavens and connecting to energy in that way. And so to really use hair for healing purposes has always been around. And so that's why I really, really love studying African history and hair, because it's all out there. And so when I do my psychological research studies, I always have to give that framework or context of hair being healing, but only in this, colonized system has it been used to harm us. I study people's hair stories in particular. So I use a narrative methodology to study people's earliest memories of their hair, a low point or a turning point, and come up with themes and codes that explain really large psychological phenomena. Right? We know what psychology is. It's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So basically, a lot of my research looks at what are our hair behaviors, why do we do those things, and how do we feel about it? What are our thought processes? And so I've really been dissecting and unpacking what's going on internally for people that maybe we're just seeing externally when it comes to hair.
Wow, that is so deep. And I know I'm going to have you back to talk more about this, because like the research that you've done is so profound. And even hearing you talk about like those high and low points of hair, it makes me reflect on mine. Like what were some of the low points I had with hair? And I remember like, being a kid, my twin sister and I, we both had like really long, thick, big hair growing up. And that wasn't like nobody was natural. We probably was like the only natural Black girls. People had perms, they had relaxers. So we was the eyeballs, like, and so I honestly, me and my sister, we didn't get comfortable with wearing our natural hair until like maybe 5-6 years ago. Like we've been natural most of our lives, but it wasn't something because of these, like the colonization and like these messages of hatred pertaining to Black hair, even amongst Black people, how like that definitely can impact you, and that can impact confidence overall. And what's so profound, like I've seen you do this. I've seen you do like narrative therapy with Jessica. I don't want to call her the girl.
Jessica Brown. Yeah, Jessica Brown.
Yes, Jessica Brown, who is well known for the Gorilla Glue. I've seen you do this and it worked. Like it really had her kind of like talking about her experiences. So it's amazing. And I love the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's funny because, as psychologists, we're oftentimes not exposing our work to other people because of issues of confidentiality. And so I recognize, again, we don't heal in isolation, and we definitely can build off of each other and collaborate to get stronger as therapists. So for you to witness that and to give me that feedback is really important for my growth and development as well.
Yeah. And even hearing you say that, we're kind of like transitioning about how like us witnessing each other performing, like practicing therapy, it makes us stronger psychologists. I can say over the past few months, like I've became a stronger psychologist in my practice by working with you and our Black Women's Therapy group.
Ditto, same to you. Yeah, our training model is to do everything by yourself, right? See all your clients by yourself. And so I know I've grown tremendously because I'm like, oh, Dr. Chanda, I wasn't even picking up on that. And that intervention you did was bomb. Like to witness in the moment, someone gather their observations and give someone feedback or direct someone to pay attention to something. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like, you are on it. And so, I think that intersubjectivity is so needed and valuable, especially for caring for Black people's mental health.
Yes. We're collectivistic. That's who we are as people. Like we weren't ever intended to be individualistic. It's very African for us to be communal, and to be, in groups amongst each other. And, as we, talking more about Black Women's Therapy and our Black Women's Therapy group, which we just launched in November. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, yo. And it was just like first of all, when you came up with that idea, I think we were just like on a call and, I was asking you some questions. We were like, well, let's do a group. And I had no idea that we were going to impact the people that we did. Like, so why would you say like being in a Black Women's Therapy group is necessary for Black women?
Okay. Well, it's interesting because I know I was trained under Yalam's teachings for group therapy. And in there, he talks about therapeutic factors. So he had recorded thousands of therapy hours for white people and came up with these techniques for group called therapeutic factors. And so the things that he lists and identified, I'm like, but I haven't seen that happen for us. So some of the therapeutic factors include universality. So recognizing like, oh, I'm going through that too. I'm not alone in this. How healing and therapeutic that is. Or another therapeutic factor like catharsis, just getting it off your chest and like sharing your story for people who actually understand it. There's things like Yalam talks about recapitulation of the family unit, which is basically we grew up in these family systems that really shaped our personalities to a fault at times. And to be able to express certain things to other people who are not your family, but who still care about you and who can support you can be extremely healing because, wait, you're not going to criticize me for doing this? Like, and to get it out and really internally reorganize your own story, I think is really important. So that was my drive and motivation. And what I think a benefit is to have those therapeutic factors that are rare actually come in a structured group for Black women specifically.
Yeah. What were some of your favorite parts of being in the Black Women's Therapy group and facilitating it?
I'm gonna have to go with the hair things. I'm gonna go without telling people stuff, but there's some quotable things that I can't quote in here, but in terms of even how hair was coming up in there, not like we just spent sessions and sessions on hair, just one or two statements like about even getting a weave, like in terms of your to-do list, like, oh, I don't have time for that. And the toll that sometimes hair care can have if we don't have the time or energy or community to get support in other areas. Yeah, I really like themes of just negotiating parents. And I think that comes up in therapy, period. But there are some unique Black family dynamics that are not in our textbooks as psychologists that I really appreciated and valued. And to see the family both as protective and even hurtful. And I think that theme came up a lot for
Absolutely.
our group members.
And, you know, I think it made it that much more important to them, the fact that that our group members can talk about a weave freely, talk about getting braids freely. Like, you know, I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about that in a group where I'm not represented.
Yeah. What was your favorite part?
Oh, man, I had so many. We talked about like so many different things, but I really loved how we would discuss like the without going too much into detail, like examples from movies. We would kind of like take characters from movies and kind of like say we're embodying those characteristics. Can I give an example you said?
Okay,
all right. So there was a moment where you talked about, I think it was the Queen Latifah, and set it off. Yeah. But that is an example that probably only like Black people would get. And you're not going to hear that in a Yalom group. You're not going to hear that.
There's going to be no Cleo. Was that her name?
Cleo, that was her name.
They're not going to make a Cleo reference. Yalom does not know who Cleo. He probably knows Queen Latifah, but not Cleo in her early film career.
Right. Exactly. So like the fact that we can talk about like a Cleo or, you know, a Set It Off or whatever inside of these types of groups, I think it really debunks like these myths about therapy, about how like intimidating it can be, or like scary it can be, even though it can be for a lot of people. At the same time, like we make it relatable because you know, we're Black women facilitating a group for Black women. It's for us, by us.
And just to be clear, that was my intention in asking you to do the group with me. I experienced you as extremely relatable, especially to Black women. And so I think that that's part of your purpose and mission too, to say like, we got PTSD too, like in terms of doing it for, you know, the culture, and recognizing that culture hugely impacts our healing processes, not just how we get sick, but our healing processes, and to make therapy something that's not scary, but something that's required and the best choice for yourself.
Absolutely. I love it. So Dr. Rafia, if you have a listener right now who is contemplating on whether or not they should join our Black Women's Therapy group, what would you tell them?
You want to heal? Do you want to heal?
Can you make that a t-shirt? I know I always tell you things to put on t-shirts, but can you make that, like, I would wear that. Do you want to heal? Like,
the choice becomes simple, right?
Yeah.
The choice is simple once you make that decision. This year, I've been totally into the self-help books. And so I've been reading all types of, it was a rough one. There's someone named Louise Hay. And so she talks about how we really need to say it to ourselves that I'm willing to change. And so are you willing to change? Because otherwise therapy is not that helpful. I'm going to be honest. If you are not willing to change, this might not be the time to start therapy.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Yeah, if you are completely resistant, but going into something, if you're willing to change, if you're willing to heal, then doing it with other people, I think, amplifies the healing process, right? Because it's not just one therapist, 1 hour, but like, I think what happens with group therapy, we see how you interact with other people and can get feedback on that, notice patterns or themes, and then group members become co-therapists.
Yes.
And can get feedback and do interventions where to have multiple people hear about what's happening in your life in a safe and sacred space, I think is different and unique compared to one-on-one. One-on-one is great, right? There's different levels of readiness, but if you want like an intensified therapeutic process, I recommend group.
I love that because, you know, a lot of people don't realize how, yes, being with a psychologist on a one-on-one therapy session is amazing. At the same time, I'm one person, and there's really, it's a limit to like what I can tell you in therapy and the interventions that I can provide. having another therapist there, having another psychologist there with their conceptualization, and your therapeutic modality is like narrative primarily. I'm primarily like CBT, so we're coming from different angles. And then like your other peers there, like supposed to be what Yalom calls a microcosm of society. It really helps you to kind of like learn how to navigate life. And you're taking those same skills and applying it outside that setting. So listen, if y'all are listening out there, you need this group in your life. Like it's none other. What other Black therapy group is going on? And if it's going on, does it have 2 Black psychologists? I don't know, because it's only 5% of us in the entire world. But like you need.
There's so much value. And I guess that's what I really want to emphasize, that this opportunity is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It's valuable. And so we want to be able to add value to your life.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, Dr. Afia, I really do love and appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming to speak to the viewers at the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast. Yes, it's a wrap, y'all. So listen, y'all, you have the power to create the emotions that you want to experience. And do me a favor, I want you to follow Dr. Afia. Make sure that you guys stay in contact with us. Ask us any questions, and we would love to have you in our next group. All right, y'all. Have a great day, and I'll see you next Wednesday.